We are live, Nisarga. Here we are.
So hello everybody. Hi Prema. It's really nice to see you and to talk a little bit about the current situation, how all the pandemic affects our nervous system. So maybe first of all, I want to say like how much I appreciate your wisdom on all the trauma work. I follow you on your YouTube, and I really appreciate the content you're putting out there, and it's very useful for me to have a deeper understanding as also a trauma practitioner. So thank you for sharing your wisdom today.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for creating this whole platform for us to be able to come together and be able to get this information out to people, because it is so important right now. We need to know ways that we can help take care of ourselves in these really stressful times. So I'm really appreciative of everything you're doing to inform people, educate people, heal people, all the great stuff that you're involved with.
Great. So just to start with, maybe I think would be good to start if we maybe start from the very basic, from the very like beginning. What is trauma? What is shock? And how trauma affect our nervous system? What it does physiologically to our body, and how our body react to it?
Okay, that's a big question. That's a whole semester's worth of material. But essentially what we can say is we all know about, I think at this point, the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches of the nervous system. The parasympathetic is more of our rest and digest. The sympathetic is more fight-flight energy. And then there's another branch of the parasympathetic that's more the freeze, the shutdown, the dissociation. That's what gets activated in high traumatic situations. But basically in trauma, whether it's, there's a tend to think about trauma as like big T trauma, big events, accidents, rape, war, big shock events. And then there's smaller T trauma, which we tend to think of it as more childhood or developmental trauma, things like neglect, not being attuned to when we're children, not having all of our needs met the way that we really needed them to. Regardless of the type of trauma that it is, it impacts us on a nervous system level. The events happened in the past. COVID-19 is happening right now. We'll talk about stress, on long-term stress in just a minute. But the event happened in the past, but our body and our nervous system develops a way of organizing itself to manage the intensity of the activation that happened in those events. And that management, that organization in our body, the way it shapes our body and our nervous system remains even after the event has ended. So with trauma, we have a problem of too much activity in our sympathetic nervous system. There's too much charge, too much activation. There's a fear of threat. There's a fear of not being able to survive. And then that gets loaded into our system. And then what often happens is this dorsal branch of the vagus nerve comes in and tries to shut down or manage the activation. And it creates a freeze response in our body. It numbs us out to our feelings. It is a way of helping us conserve energy, really. It's a way to help us not have to have this high, intense energy so activated in us, and helps us in times of high levels of potential pain, potential danger, to not feel as much, and numbs us out. And the problem is after the traumatic event is over and we have survived it, parts of our nervous system are still running that high energy underneath it, and is still running that freezy kind of numb out break underneath it as well. So in trauma, it's about what has been left in our body as a result of trying to deal with the challenging situation or situations that we went through.
Okay, so it's interesting what you mentioned about these two responses stuck on, which is this hyperactivation of sympathetic nervous system, or freeze dissociation of dorsal vagal complex, which is basically dissociation, freeze, going into depression, into withdrawal. But my question would be then how we can come out of these two unhealthy responses in a way, because those two are something that keeps us in that unhealthy loop of either overstimulation or understimulation, and how we can connect to that healthy state of being present, and how that relate into physiology of trauma.
Sure. There's a whole other thing that happens too, is our it's called our adrenal system gets activated in times of stress and trauma. So we have not only what's happening with the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and the hormones, or the stress, what they release, like adrenaline, opioids, things like that. But under stress, our adrenals get activated as well. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, gets activated. And that causes our adrenals to pump out cortisol, which is the main stress hormone then that over long periods of time continually gets put out into our body. Now, there's supposed to be a negative feedback loop, meaning when our levels of cortisol reach a certain level in our bloodstream, they signal to our hypothalamus and our pituitary and our brain, okay, stop sending the signals to secrete more cortisol. But when we're continually under stress, our body keeps sending out more and more and more cortisol. And cortisol interferes with our digestion. It can cause things like brain fog. Cortisol interferes with dopamine, and dopamine is the main hormone that helps us feel pleasure and joy and motivation. So the more cortisol that's being released into our system, the more adverse health effects, mentally and physically, we'll see over a period of time. So the answer to all of this is finding ways to help our body and help our mind come back into a sense of safety, to come back into a sense of, okay, in this moment, as I look around the room I'm in, as I let my eyes look around and I notice where I'm at, I can see that even though there's a lot of fear of what's happening out there, I'm actually safe. And this is challenging in times like this, of course, because one of the main ways that we find safety is through connection with others. Our ventral vagus, which is the other branch of the vagus nerve. So that, like I said, that we have that rest and digest, and then we also have that shut down and freeze. That rest and digest is part of that is being able to connect. It's called the ventral vagal nerve. The digestion, I don't want to get too complicated here. The shutdown and freeze is kind of a high tone of that dorsal nerve. The low tone of it is when we're able to digest our food. But a whole nother branch of the vagus nerve, the ventral vagal, is all about connection. It's about attuning to others. It's always about seeing, am I safe, and resonating with others. It's what allows us to read fine facial expressions, little changes. We're tuning to our environment. We're looking for clues from others that we belong, that we're safely. And so in times like this, when many of us are only making connection over a video, that can be challenging. And so we have to find ways through such things as mindfulness, through such ways of finding other ways of connection that are not in person but are online, through meditation, through taking care of our body, through coming back into the present moment to reconnect with even small cues of safety. Because that's one of the big difference, I think, between fear and anxiety. Fear is about what's happening right now in front of us. Fear is actually a really important emotion. It causes us to take action. It causes us to run. That's really good when you're being chased by a bear. You want that immediate reaction. It's life-saving. But anxiety is fear about what might happen at some point in the future. And anxiety often causes us to ruminate. It causes us to over and over and over and over think and think and think, and we spin out into our heads. And when we do that, we usually don't come up with very good solutions to our problems. We tend to produce lots of extra cortisol, lots of extra stress hormones, And we don't find ways to come back into the present. We're very future oriented. And then we're able to create all sorts of stories about what might happen then that keeps us in this loop, that keeps us into this cycle. So one of the answers to your question is, how do we come out of this? And we need to look at, really, mindfulness is an important way of doing it, coming back into our bodies in a mindful way. Anxiety will have us in a loop where all we can do is fixate on our thoughts. And I'm not saying that thoughts are bad and body is good. We need both. But anxiety takes us away. It cuts us off because it creates all sorts of unpleasant sensations in our body. And then those feed into unpleasant thoughts and worry and more and more and more. And it gets amplified bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when we're able to take, even if it's just a brief moment, even if it's just a few seconds or a minute or two of starting to break that cycle, starting to break that fearful thoughts about the future and coming back into being present to ourselves in this moment, slowing down, softening our muscles, maybe putting a hand on our heart, a hand on our belly, and feeling into our breath. We're able to come out of that whoosh and start to come back here and start to be present, going from the future story to what's actually right here. Softening the small muscles around our eyes, being present to the sensations that are here in our body right now and just being with them, not trying to fix them or fight them or push them away, but being present to what's currently arising and feeling into, okay, what do I need in this moment? Taking a breath, slowing down, and then being able to come up with what might be more beneficial action from there. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And even like listening when you just just connects me straight away to ventral vagal complex, just that social engagement by looking how you guided last minute or two with that softness, with that relaxation. It's definitely a big resource for me. I personally, when I look into myself in the last weeks, what's happening, that I look for ways to engage with the social engagement by listening something that is nourishing. Like, for example, this Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. I really like listening to him. He has this beautiful, sweet, loving, joyful presence that no matter what he's talking about, I just put him on, and it's just like really brings me back to that like safety and presence into my body, into my breath. So I really appreciate what you said about that ventral vagal complex, that it helps to come out of stuck on or stuck on off and be more present to what is here and now, what's. But the question I had actually that comes from that is, can we ourselves, by talking to ourselves in that loving, peaceful way, activate that social engagement for ourselves? Is that really also possible, or this is something that has to come like external resource? Like how do you see that?
That's a beautiful question. The truth is, our nervous system is built to attune to those around us. And they don't have to be, as you just demonstrated, they don't have to be physically around us. Hearing Thich Nhat Hanh's voice, you are attuning to what his energy, what his words, what his tone of voice is. That's sending a signal from his nervous system to your nervous system. And emotions are contagious. Anxiety is contagious. You're around somebody who's anxious, you're going to start feeling anxious. But also, laughter is contagious. Smiles are contagious. Calm and presence is contagious. And that's why we love listening to such wonderful teachers, because they're able to transmit something very powerful that they've really grounded in their being, and it's able to be transmitted to others. And so we're able to attune to that. So can we do it for ourselves? Yeah, I believe we can, because we can also do things that support coming out of that charge, that sympathetic too high activation, or that freezy dorsal part, and lowering the activation. Things like with our breath, by taking in even breathing. Some people like to do the box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and then you hold for 4, and then you breathe in, you repeat that. That helps activate the ventral vagus nerve and helps lower sympathetic charge. Or taking in a nice even breath and then letting out a little bit of a longer breath. That also tends to be more toning to that ventral vagus nerve. That's why actually singing can be so helpful, because with singing, usually you take in a little bit of a breath and then comes out, whatever it may be, and that tends to be a longer breath. So things like singing and chanting can help support our nervous system. Like I said, meditation, putting a hand on our heart, putting a hand on our heart and one hand in the back of our neck can be very soothing and supportive. Taking, if you have like a little bean bag, putting those little eye pillows or bean bag in the microwave and getting it nice and warm, and then laying with that on your heart, or one in the back of your head so it's by your brainstem area, or even over your eyes. All of that can signal your nervous system that it's safe now, because fear and anxiety makes us contract and tighten up. But when we're able to take some rest, and through things like warmth and touch and sounds, we're able then to signal to our nervous system, you know what, there's not threat right now. Come back to this present moment. You're actually safe in this moment. And so, yes, we can do this for ourselves as well. But we are social creatures. And so I think taking time like this, and just what you're saying, finding who are some of the teachers out there that help us feel more present, help us feel more connected with ourselves, and giving extra time for that. Turn off the news, turn off the news for a period of time and listen to someone else that instead is mentally feeding you. It's going to be so important in these times to really protect our mental space, and then coming back to our bodies.
Fantastic. I'm also like very kinesthetic. I love touch, and a lot of my work is based on touch also as a therapist. So having that part out of my lifestyle, it's challenging, but I discovered also we can give it to ourselves. Like yesterday I was on this webinar with self body work. I think you were also there.
Yes, it
And
was fantastic.
we were giving body work to ourselves on the legs and feet, and it felt so good afterwards, like taking care of myself. It was very nourishing, and I feel so grounded today, and I think I will add it to my daily practice also, that self-touch, self-awareness of touch. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, I love that webinar yesterday, Satyarthi's webinar, and I can't wait for the next 3 that he's going to be doing. It was, what a gift. And to take an hour and a half and just focus on the lower legs and feet. I can't remember the last time I did something like that. So I think in these times, finding those moments of self-care, and whether, maybe it's taking a bubble bath, or, curling up with some stuffed animals and watching a childhood movie, hugging stuffed animals at this time. Order some from Amazon if you don't have any at home. Anything like that can be really helpful, for sure.
Great. Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Yeah, I feel so much inspiration from this talk, and I hope everybody else also took some tips about how we can be more present, more grounded in this time. It's time of transition, and as much as we go through difficulties, I think this time also will bring a lot of beautiful things, a lot of transformative things, and I personally, a big resource for me is to wake up and, despite of difficulty, find a gratitude, what I'm grateful for today. And we always can find those places where our life is full of gratitude. So
I
thank you,
love
Prema.
that, what you're saying there, because gratitude also brings in a part of our brain that's our witnessing brain. We have those three parts. We have the cortex, which is more of our rational brain. And then we have our limbic system, which is the emotional brain that is so triggered right now with all the fear and anxiety. And then we have the reptilian brain, which is our fight flight response. And the more we can be in our cortex, particularly the front part, this prefrontal cortex, with things like mindfulness, gratitude, witnessing, meditation, the more and more we're in that, it helps this part control those fear thoughts. It helps the prefrontal cortex dampen down all the fear and anxiety that the amygdala is putting out right now. So that gratitude piece is wonderful. It's so important. It helps us recognize what's actually happening in the current moment. Because it's so easy for our attention to go with what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. And those are some of the looping anxiety thoughts. But when we're able to balance that, even if it's just for a short period of time, but to break that what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong looping with small bits of gratitude, small bits of listening to something supportive, small bits of self-touch, small bits of breathing practices. Over time, neuroplasticity teaches us that those small changes create more and more larger changes in our system and are really important right now. And then the last thing I'll say with all that is the importance of self-compassion, because it's really easy to beat ourselves up right now. Oh God, I sat on the couch for all day long. I got nothing done. And I watched the news in my pajamas and I didn't even shower today. It's true. It's going to happen. It's okay. We need to give some compassion and space for ourselves that these are extraordinary times that we're going through. And most of us are being stressed beyond a capacity that we've ever experienced before. And our life has changed. Most of us have never experienced this radical of a life change in this short of a period of time. And so remembering, coming back, putting your hands on your heart and letting yourself know, sweetheart, it's okay. We're doing the best that we can. We're really doing the best that we can. And yeah, maybe I don't want to repeat yesterday, what I did yesterday, and want to have a better day today, but finding ways to be more compassionate and forgiving and understanding of ourselves, that also brings us back into presence and stops fueling that fire of fear and of anxiety.
Beautiful. I really like that about that self-compassion. That's beautiful. I'm on the other extreme when I would judge myself for not being in the pajamas, so I will bring that up and just allow myself to also be in that space of, just non-doing or just resting as well. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we had this talk, Nisarga. I hope people find this beneficial. There's so much here to learn, and we're going to be doing the course next Friday on stepping out of fear and coming into our truth. And we'll be working more with people one-on-one in this, because it's hard to see what our patterns are sometimes, because we're swimming in them. We're like fish in water. And so also getting one-on-one support with a trusted, friend or therapist or somebody who can really help us land and come back into ourselves and come into the present moment and out of the fear. Getting support during these times is really important.
Yeah, I think that's true. And like reaching out, I think reaching out for me, what is important at times where I feel lost or that anxiety is like overtaking, because, it's one thing to have that, like understanding, but the other thing is when I am in it, when I'm in it, it's like so hard sometimes to see, I'm just overtaking, and that those moments when I'm lost, it's like signal for me, okay, slow down, reach out for help, for support. And then I usually call a friend, and all those Zoom calls that we have sometimes with the team, they're really resourceful for me, or with our communities, because we can share and we can really just have that intimate connection with others, virtually, but still those connections are very, very deep.
Yes. absolutely built on years of trust and understanding and doing work and being more and more comfortable with our vulnerability. These times are bringing up vulnerability in us. You know, to be uncertain about our future is one of the most key vulnerable things that we can feel.
Mm.
So reaching out for trust and reaching out for connection in times when we're feeling so vulnerable and shaky. You know, most of us grew up in families where vulnerability wasn't really supported. You learned to be tough, you learned to try and be perfect, you learned to whatever the coping pattern is that you learn to work really hard instead of feeling vulnerable, or you learn to try and be really smart or really good at something instead of feeling vulnerable. Well, a lot of those coping strategies we don't have right now. And so our vulnerabilities and these core wounds from our childhood are coming up to the surface. And we may be experiencing like we've never experienced them before, and having to learn all new skills to be with ourselves as adults, because we are more resourced now. We have abilities and strengths and support in our adulthood that we maybe didn't have as children. And so we can be with ourselves and we can be with our vulnerability in all new ways, and tremendous growth can come out of that.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you, Prema.
Thank you.
So maybe for the finishing, if it would be okay with you, would you be okay to guide us into some very short practice, 1 to 3 minutes, that like brings us back, you know, when we are lost in all this anxiety and fear and thoughts in this cloud. What would be a short practice that you would guide us through in the closure of this call?
Sure. Way to throw that on me, Niz. So yeah, okay. So just finding a position for your body that's comfortable. And your eyes can be opened or closed, whatever you like, but trying to have a little bit of length in your spine. Feeling the support of whatever it is that you're sitting on, maybe the cushions underneath your sits bones, or if there's a back to what you're sitting on. Letting your back take in what it feels like to be met, to be supported. Allowing your weight to drop down. Letting heaviness come down to your legs, your thighs, your lower legs, and into your feet. And feeling the contact of your feet on the floor. And as you notice the sensations of your feet on the floor, allowing your breath to soften. And bringing, if you can, a little bit of curiosity to the sensations in your feet. Noticing any tingling or warmth. And feeling the connection of your feet to the ground. Knowing that underneath your feet somewhere is the earth. And inviting an energetic connection, almost like there was roots coming down your legs, through your feet, into the ground. And feeling that connection, that unconditional support of the earth. And we are part of that. Every moment, every breath we have ever lived has been supported by the earth. Sensing in and seeing if there's any messages of gratitude or hope or wishes that you'd like to send to the earth? And if so, allowing those messages to travel down through these roots and having them be received by Mother Earth. And just as the earth has always been there and supported us, allowing her energy, her strength, her presence, that essential nature of life force energy to also come back to the earth, from the earth up through your legs, filling your belly. And taking a few deeper breaths into your belly, letting your awareness spread out just from your own body into the space around you. Perhaps there's a prayer or a wish or a thought, an intention you want to send out into your space. If so, allowing that, just letting it come. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's so much peaceful, so much more peaceful. Great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nisarga, for this talk
Thank
today.
you.
I really
Thank
enjoyed
you
it.
very much. Thank you.
And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.